Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
Okay, listeners, welcome to another episode of the Punching Up Movie Podcast, where two long-standing friends and movie lovers take a movie that is either a classic, a cult classic, or just simply loved by a lot of people, which one or both of us have an issue with, and try and punch it in the face, the body, or even the nuts. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take on a classic of action cinema, 1993's hard-boiled John Woo's balletic ballet of cops and gangsters in Hong Kong. So, Damian, would you like to give us a breakdown of the plot of Hard-Boiled, such as it is?
Yep. So Hard-Boiled, or Lat Sao San Tam, or God of Guns, which is probably a better title. It's a Hong Kong thriller from 92, 93. A rogue policeman, Tequila, played by Chow Yun-fat, does things his own way, and that usually ends up with people dying, lots of people dying. He teams up with an undercover cop, Alan, played by Tony Leung Choi Wai, to bring down psychopathic gangster Johnny Wong, played with menace in pastel-coloured suits by Anthony Wong. It's, as Adam said, balletic, kinetic, and it has a violent aesthetic that had never been seen before. I mean, why use one bullet when you can use 200? One of the quotes the superintendent says about the main character Tequila is, "Give a guy a gun and he's Superman, give him two and he's God." Lots of guns, lots of action sequences, and John Woo's calling card to Hollywood.
So, the making of Hard-Boiled. Hard-Boiled, it's fair to say that at this point in John Woo's career, he'd had a bit of a sort of slow start. He'd made films in the 70s. I don't think a lot of them had made a lot of impact. He'd even worked with Jackie Chan in the early part of his career. And then in the 80s, you know, in conjunction with the sort of legendary Hong Kong producer Chewy Choi Hark. Choi. Apologies to all our listeners in mainland China and Hong Kong for mangling possibly one of the greatest producers of you know, sort of Hong Kong action movies name. I'm just going to call him Mr. Hark from this point on. So yeah, Mr. Hark produces a run of gangster movies that reinvigorate the genre, and so John Woo creates, along with Mr. Hark, I think what they call heroic bloodshed movies, bullet ballets, as various sort of ways of describing them, which are largely stories of honourable gangsters and their sort of shadow counterparts in the law. Yeah, they're normally a lot about gangsters who have these sort of honourable sort of frenemy relationships with cops, and they're normally united, come together to fight a common evil in terms of an unscrupulous gangster. There's a lot of honor in them. Most of them star Chow Yun-fat, who John Woo sort of basically plucked from sort of TV, soap opera, actordom, and made him, you know, a movie star. And they're sort of typified by you know, sort of a mixture of frenetic action, slow motion, lots of slow motion gunplay, two-handed gunplay. That's a big signature. You know, like two automatic pistols, and sort of kind of quasi acrobatic sort of stunts. You know, like guys, he likes his protagonist sliding down banisters, sliding across the floor. He likes I was about to say he likes three ways. He likes Mexican standoffs. He may have done offset. I think John Woo was a very morally upright guy. Actually, I think he's a Lutheran. So probably none of that. And so there was a string of hits that included, you know, Better Tomorrow 2, A Bullet to the Head, and sort of kind of reaches its apex in The Killer. And then off the back of these movies, he faces criticism, doesn't he, about glorifying gangsters. And so he wants to put a cop front and center of the movie, and he sort of bases this cop that Chow Yun-fat plays on a real cop that he knew who loved jazz. He was a jazz drummer. Presumably, he didn't kill loads of people, as many people in real life as Chow Yun-fat does in this film. Damien, did you know what the original idea for the original plot idea for Hard Boiled was? Just nothing like what we see on film. Because what he wanted to do, John Woo, is he wanted to emulate the cop films of the 60s and 70s, like Bullet and Dirty Harry in particular.
That's right, yeah, Dirty Harry.
Yeah, and in Dirty Harry, obviously, it's a duel between, a cop who's frustrated with the rules that are constraining him and a psychopathic serial killer. And in this, it was like the cop Tequila versus a murderer that killed children by poisoning baby powder. And that was the original idea. Nice. Choi Hart basically he buries that because Americans, funnily enough, because Americans won't like that. Hong Kong people are obviously all right with baby killing murderers, but not Americans. And so effectively, a few things happen that are kind of a complete sort of disjuncture to the way we normally expect films to be made. Like they shoot the opening gunfight without actually basically having a plot. They shoot it first and then think, well, how are we going to graft this into the rest of the story? And then they just come up with, I suppose, a more generic sort of, maverick cop, who forms a connection with a hitman in the gang he's trying to bring down, and the hitman isn't all he seems. And then they're looking for this arms stash, and they shoot the film basically without a script, because the screenwriter Barry Wong dies of a heart attack in Germany. They run into production problems because they have to pay triads off to use certain buildings. The big set piece, which is a half-hour gun battle, I think it's longer than that. I did time it. I've read that it's half an hour. They filmed in a Coca-Cola plant, and they were working around the clock and exhausting their crew. And Tony Leung, in one particular bit of action choreography, gets glass in his face. They don't even put sugar glass in. They're blasting out real glass. He gets a bunch of glass in his face, is taken to hospital, comes back a week later, resumes shooting. And then they turn in this movie that actually, considering its reputation as John Woo's best sort of Hong Kong action movie, doesn't do that well commercially in Hong Kong. It does all right. And then they release it in America in the Toronto International Film Festival, and the audiences just do backflips for it. And that warrants not a massive release in America, but a limited cinema release, which is the beginning of this cult reputation that builds and builds and builds. And John Woo was probably I think he was already on his way to America, but this kind of cemented his reputation. And he came to America, and he had a decade and a bit long run of just being the go-to guy for action, and so everyone works with him really. So he starts off his American career with sort of reasonably big budget for Van Damme movie, and then moves on to working with like John Travolta twice in Broken Arrow and Face Off, where Face Off is the one everybody remembers, and then Nicolas Cage a couple of times in Face Off and Wind Talkers, and then just lands the big fish of doing the Mission Impossible sequel. He has two massive hits and a lot of commercial failures, and then sort of retreats to Hong Kong in the noughties.
So Choi Hark didn't produce Hard Boiled. So Choi Hark and John Woo, they were producing films for a while until I think A Better Tomorrow 2, where they fell out on artistic creative differences. So then John Woo went off to make The Killer, and Choi Hark made A Better Tomorrow 3. So at that point, they sort of they did a little distance.
So Choi Hark might have approved of the baby powder murder.
Probably, yeah.
We might have had a completely different. Yeah, he's quite wild, isn't he? Like Choi Hark, so he probably would have. Because he did Once Upon a he didn't do he did the Once Upon a Time.
Once Upon a Time in China.
China movies. That wasn't the one I was thinking of. The Chinese ghost story movies with the with the where a man has a fight with a giant tongue.
Brilliant,
isn't it? So if he's all right with that, like he's going to be okay with poisoning babies in poison baby powder. When it comes out in America, people just go crazy, and in England as well. They go crazy, and I've sort of assembled a load of quotes John Woo is God. That's one. A load of quotes. That was a sort of publicity quote that was on. I remember those. I remember those posters in Chinatown. Tarantino, the most exciting director to emerge in action cinema since Sergio Leone, completely cutting out Peckinpah. Sam Raimi, John Woo is to action what Hitchcock is to suspense. BBC Two moving pictures, Mozart, the Mozart of Mayhem, and then
Nice, I
Empire
like
just
that.
seemed. I don't really, because I don't think it's true. And Empire just absolutely loved him, and so Empire. This is from the Empire Review. Infinitely more exciting than a dozen diehards. Action cinema doesn't come any better than this. And then to cap it all, as if they haven't made their point clear, I'm not sure when they did this poll. It's number 70 in the 100 best films of world cinema, and then Tequila is number 33 in the 100 greatest movie characters of all time. So what do I have against Hard Boiled, which is admittedly an incredibly entertaining action film, is all these superlatives used about John Woo that seem to elevate him above, every other action director, apart from Sergio Leone, if you're Tarantino. And my issue with John Woo, and particularly, say, Hard Boiled, is that there's too much action in it. Can you have enough action in an action movie? And I think you can have too much. And action fatigue sets in after a while, to the point where you get a little bit numb to these incredibly long, intricately choreographed action sequences, because they are underscored by what Bruce Lee would call emotional content. And John Woo's version of characterization is very cartoonish and simplistic. You have these two cops. Tequila, who I have to say, and I like Chow Yun-fat, is so annoying. He's like this wild guy always shouting at his boss. I think I've seen that in 1,000. He's a borderline sociopath, which is never addressed. Every gun battle he initiates results in the slaughter of like about 50 civilians, which if they sort of played it for laughs would be great, but it's sort of not commented upon. And then Tony Leung, who I actually think is very, very good in this film, his psychological motivation is reduced really to, and he's more, I don't want to sort of spoil who or what he is. Or you're just waving your hand, you're going to spoil it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a cop, basically.
Yeah.
He's an undercover cop, but he's an undercover cop who seems to have a little bit more liberty in establishing his cover by killing people. So he's, and so that's part of his psychological motivation, but it seems to be reduced to this one thing where every time he kills someone, he makes a paper crane and releases it to kind of absolve him of his guilt or to honor the dead. and I think John Woo's films work emotionally on a very, very cartoonish, sort of childish level, which wouldn't be so bad if he didn't cite great filmmakers as influences. Like, he cites Jean-Pierre Melville, and you can see that in the way his characters dress, not so much in Hard Boiled, but his characters wear trench coats like Alain Delon would wear a trench coat as a suit of armor. They're infused with a sense of honor, but there's nothing of the kind of existential complexity of a sort of a Jean-Pierre Melville. And Jean-Pierre Melville would never shoot a shootout. Like his shootouts are terse, they're quick, they're over very quickly. And I suppose what really, really bugs me is the sort of invocations of Peckinpah. And the only thing I think that he's got in common with Peckinpah is he knows how to shoot a slow motion action sequence. But if you watch any good Peckinpah movie, and did you know that Tequila is a direct homage to the Wild Bunch, the name of Tequila, because apparently it's about the way William Holden drank his tequila in the Wild Bunch. But the Wild Bunch, which I do mention a lot on these podcasts, is a very, very...
I'm joking.
Talking about the Wild Bunch, just me talking for about 10 minutes solid.
It's about Peckinpah and the Wild Bunch.
Peckinpah and the Wild Bunch. The thing about any Peckinpah movie is it's so difficult to come down like completely morally on where these characters stand, because they are complex, sometimes unpleasant, sometimes honorable, and the action sequences sort of frame these incredible kind of morally ambiguous, morally sort of deliberately confused, messy portraits of professional killers or or I don't think they're any. Yeah, they're all killers, criminals, outlaws, cowboys, and whatnot. And John Woo doesn't do any of that, and I think it actually makes his films kind of paradoxically quite boring sometimes. Not always, but to have so much action and so much cartoonish characterization, you feel you're just watching this massive cartoon. And I would really enjoy this gunfight if it was 2 minutes long rather than 20 minutes long. So I've just sort of expiated all my spleen about John Woo.
Sit in the corner for a minute. Take a second.
Yeah. I'll catch my breath. Yeah, go on, Damian. Please talk.
So, as far as your points about John Woo being elevated to the heights of genius and Mozart and God, I don't care about all that. That's just hyperbole that writers use all the time.
Which he never says about himself, by the way. He never says anything about that. So he's a very humble man. I like him as a man. Yeah.
Same thing about the lists. I don't care about that. They're just lists. Yeah. They don't really mean anything to me. For me, it's about the experience of watching the film and what I feel, not necessarily in comparison to other films, but just how I feel watching this. So when it came out in 92, I was a massive fan. I bought the video box set of it. I think it's disappeared now, but I loved it. Enjoyed The Killer. But really enjoyed Hard Boiled. I feel like Hard Boiled is like the apex, as you said, of all his Hong Kong thrillers. And what I liked about it, what I still like about it, is it represents a time in Hong Kong cinema where you've gone from gung fu to gun fu. So you're basically there was so much kung fu films, all the Jackie Chan, Yuen Biao, Sammo Hung films coming off the back of all the Bruce Lee stuff in the 70s and 80s, the Michelle Yeoh. I loved all those films, a lot of them. I was I'd watched a lot of those in my teens. So when this came out in my early 20s, it represented kind of like how Reservoir Dogs elevated the sort of police the gangster film as far as American cinema did. It was very different. Came out around the same time, right? Was it 92? I think both of them.
I think it's 93 came out, yeah.
And Reservoir Dogs was famously based on Kubrick's The Killing and also Ringo Lam's City on Fire, which I just watched in this little bubble of Chinese cinema around Hard Boiled. I just like it historically. I like the fact that it really did something that had never really been done before in the way that it was done. Yes, Peckinpah had done slow motion violence before, but I just don't think we'd ever seen anything so visceral, so kinetic, so unrelenting, which, obviously you've got a problem with. Yes, the characters are slightly cartoon-esque. I heard that Chow Yun-fat wanted to humanize his character a little bit more, so he suggested the jazz club and suggested that John Woo play the jazz club owner in order for those scenes to remain in the film, because he thought John Woo's not going to cut himself out of the film. John Woo was also in A Better Tomorrow, so he had like a couple of little.
But the jazz is so bad though. It's like
real.
Of course. It's like but that's the thing. It's like the jazz doesn't add anything to it. The jazz actually makes it slightly more kind of clunky.
I'm not saying it does. I'm saying that Chow Yun-fat wanted to add.
Bilk. It's like the only jazz person they've listened to is Akka Bilk, right? They haven't heard of Miles Davis.
And also, there's all like Chow Yun-fat's doing all this sort of like head bobbing. It's almost like he's in the fast show jazz, like cool jazz. But we do get to see John Woo act a little bit more than normal, which was quite nice.
He's all right. He's pretty good in it. He's a pretty good actor.
Yeah, I thought he was quite good. Very muted and very non-acting, which I kind of like. Chow Yun-fat's character Tequila is annoying. Is a bit of a sort of whiny doing it himself. But I think to an extent, you have to just leave all that behind and just enjoy the cartoon-esque, graphic novel-y, comic book type style. For me, is what I enjoyed about it. I'd never really seen anything like that before, and it definitely exploded action cinema in a way at that time into a way that had never really been seen before.
I agree with that. And you couldn't come across a '90s American action movie without guys having two guns and Mexican standoffs and doves as well. That's another thing that. But I was
yeah. Were there any doves in? Sorry.
Yeah, I think there might be. There's briefly. I know there's lots of doves in the Killer. Yeah. I remember there's I think there's doves in Face Off. He has doves and he has a shootout in a church. He's kind of playing the hits a little bit in Face Off, I think.
Are there any doves in Hard Boiled?
I think there's one. I think there's a pigeon or something. There's a dove. A picture of a dove and there's lots of paper cranes. But no, I think there might be a dove. I think there's one. I think there's a pigeon or something. There's a dove. A picture of a dove and there's lots of paper cranes. But no, I think there might be a dove that that sort of flies by, and there's a kind of warehouse shootout with lots of motorcycles. No, but I think all of these is like sort of all of these are almost like stand-ins for character. So I think the interesting comparison, because I'm going to go back to the hyperbole, because this is one of the reasons like it's a subject for punching up, because it's been elevated by a lot of this. A lot of this praise in the '90s as one of the great action cinema movies, possibly like one of the best bits of like action cinema ever made. And to sort of say that it's better than a dozen Die Hards, it depends what he means by that. Is he's talking about the sequels, and fair enough, but Die Hard, I would argue, is a better action film. The action's not as spectacular as the best sequences in Hard Boiled, and I want to talk about one of the sequences and really praise that. But what it has is it's rooted in character in the way that I don't think hardly any John Woo movies of this run of movies are. That Bruce Willis is. I mean, he does superheroic things, but the suspension of disbelief in Die Hard is that you don't believe that they're superheroic. You believe he's a tough guy, he's a cop, and he's forced into situations. He has this sort of running commentary, which is very charming, very human. He's got a wife out. He's got a wife. He's sort of kind of obviously his marriage is on the rocks. He's concerned about his wife, and we have great sort of longueurs in between the action, and when the action comes, it's just about the right length, and you go back to this very, very human sort of character. I mean, the Guardian did I think when Bruce Willis, like, when it came out, he got dementia. They did this top 20 Bruce Willis performances, and I thought, what's going to be number one? And they put Die Hard over anything else. And I thought, yeah, great, it should be Die Hard, because the reason that film works is because it's beautifully written, and it's based around a sort of a credible protagonist that is a believable human being, as well as being effectively an action hero. And you don't get any of that. What you get is like a series of shorthands. No, it's like Tequila shouts a lot. He's got his little match in his mouth. Tony Leung makes paper cranes. He likes jazz, so that's that everything's like a stand-in. Like, so he's got culture, he's got this, and then they're not very. But even The Killer, which I do actually like, although admittedly I haven't seen it for like almost a couple of decades. You even have these like weird things that kind of slightly upend the action. Like they have these the cop and the killer have these nicknames for each other, Mickey and Dumbo, don't they? They call each other like Disney character names. And by the end, when they're getting like shot to bits, they scream Mickey, Dumbo, and you think it's silly, and it's sort of, and it is literally cartoonish, and that they're invoking, go on then.
As far as that Mickey and Dumbo thing goes, that's about the translation.
Is it?
The version that I saw didn't say Mickey and Dumbo; it had different names,
like Pikachu.
Like Fatso. So it's about who translated it and which version you saw. It's like the version of
fair enough.
Hard Boiled that I saw was calling Alan, Tony Leung's character, Long. Yeah. So it obviously depends on that. But yeah, I hear what you say. I mean, I thought the film was well paced for the most part, and this time round, I think so. When it first came out, I loved it. I saw it again maybe a few years ago, maybe in lockdown, and found it a little bit boring, as you said. Like there is nothing to sort of grab onto character wise. But this time when I watched it, I just enjoyed it. I thought it was a really great ride, and I was on board for the most part. Enjoyed Tony Leung. I really enjoyed Anthony Wong. It's nice to see him. I like Anthony Wong. I'd seen him in quite a few films back in the day. Done a few Johnny Toe films. Have you seen any of Johnny Toe's?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of Johnny Toe films.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed the ones I've seen.
Same.
And famously, he's the he's like the main sort of cop boss in Infernal Affairs.
Superintendent.
Superintendent.
Yeah.
You know, so no, I don't know. I thought he did his job well. I just found him. I think he's probably filled out later on in life. He didn't look like a gang boss to me. It's almost like his face doesn't have any bones in it. And so, yeah, he seemed, which is why I was happy that Mad Dog was there as the kind of honourable.
We need to
henchman.
talk about Mad Dog. Definitely.
Philip Kwok. He was the action choreographer, which explains why I haven't really seen him in too many other movies, because I thought he was phenomenal. He's a great henchman.
Have you seen?
I've somehow tricked me into sort of saying nice things about the
film. Anthony Wong's suits, they have that sort of 90s feel, like late 80s, early 90s feel, where they're like too big for the body. So when you were saying he fills out, like he literally just looks like, had he been given like a more sort of tailored fit, maybe that might have made him, because he doesn't need to be a big guy.
But don't you think he's like cartoonishly evil? You know, just
yes.
The fact that,
of course.
If there's any civilians to kill, he'll kill them.
Yeah,
we've got these great bits in the hospital where he's just like, like Mad Dog won't kill nurses.
The nurses,
throws them all down. He's like, I won't kill nurses. That's the line I won't cross. Or babies. And so I like Anthony Wong. I didn't really like him in that. I like Mad Dog. I like Mad Dog and Tony Leung, and that was about it. And then everyone else got my nerves. And what did you think about all this stuff with the for those who haven't seen the film, there's this kind of really convoluted sort of sequence where Tony Leung communicates in Lionel Richie songs, and the music from Lionel Richie or Nat King Cole songs, and it's just really weird, where you've got these this secretary who's like sort of Chow Yun-fat's on-off girlfriend singing these notes to Chow Yun-fat's boss, who types. So it just seems a really convoluted and attention grabbing way of sending secret messages.
Are you somewhere feeling lonely or someone's loving you?
Thank you.
And they're always accompanied by flowers. So it just makes no sense, which would be fine if he was just making a cartoon, but he's
which
not.
He is really.
No, but not in his mind. He's not. If you read interviews with him, he's looking for. Again, I'll come back to this. His reach exceeds his grasp when it comes to like trying to create something profound that sort of explores the nature of honor and morality in a sort of potentially amoral profession, either being a cop or a killer. Well, killer's immoral, and like how people can sort of, and his thing is like there are, there's good in everyone, and it's quite a simplistic morality. And I don't think he's a sort of very morally complex storyteller. So I'll tell you you're going to hate me for this. I'll tell you the John Woo film I had the best time with recently is Hard Target, his Van Damme movie, and this goes back to the first episode of this new series. Like I watched Inception and didn't have a very good time with Inception. And I just taped Hard Target off the telly and sort of put Hard Target on afterwards, after the pretensions of Inception, and it was just such a palate cleanser because it had no ambition other than to be a really entertaining cartoon with Van Damme front and center, and an even better version of Mad Dog in Arnold Vosloo just before he becomes the mummy, in the Brendan Fraser mummy movies, as this sort of really, really cartoonishly nasty South African hunter of men in New Orleans. And it's 90 minutes and the action sequences don't go on too long. And it's such good fun. And this is almost cinema blasphemy. I enjoyed it a lot more than Hard Boiled, which has more ambition. And I have to say, at its best, has one of the best action sequences I've seen in a long time. So can I just briefly praise it? Which is the the one action sequence in Hard Boiled you think I really, really enjoyed, and it relates to our last episode?
So there's the one in the factory at the start, there's the one at the hospital at the end, and then there's something in the middle.
I'll give you clues, but it's part of the hospital shootout. So the hospital shootout goes on for about 35 minutes. So there's so many different sort of chapters and sequences.
Was it in the gun cache, or was it the baby?
No. It's the uninterrupted take where Tony Young and Chow Yun Fat clean out an entire corridor of gangsters.
Yeah.
Get in a lift. The lift opens and they clean out a second corridor of gangsters, all done in one take. And I was thinking they have to have cheated the edit on that. But reading about it, they didn't. And what they did was they built this set with unlike One Cut of the Dead, where deliberately, as it turns out, you can see the joins, you can see where actors are ducking out. Nothing violent that happens looks real. In this, they're literally blasting out chunks. The stuntmen are being shot through windows, and they're blowing chunks of the. And so it didn't surprise me that Tony Young nearly got blinded by flying bits of glass, because they're decimating this corridor, and then they're going into this like fake elevator. And then they're giving the illusion that the elevator's going down. But so there's this like little hiatus where I think they're reloading. And in all that time, they're literally in real time rebuilding the set. And then and I didn't like it just because it was a sort of, you think, well, how did they do that? Because I think then the sequence hasn't worked. You got to be in the sequence, but you're kind of in it, but you're outside of it, watching this phenomenal one-take gun battle that takes place over 2 corridors. And then afterwards, or there's a little part of your brain think, how on earth did they did that? That's so exhilarating. And that's John Woo at his best. And there's no characterization in it. It's just a brilliantly staged gun battle. And I wish if they'd been a little more economy in not making every set piece last like 20 minutes or half an hour or 10 minutes. And we'd just be left with like fewer sequences like that. And the sort of characterization you get in the film that we've mentioned, Infernal Affairs, it would have been absolutely brilliant. But I'm not sure at that point in his career it was within John Woo's ability to create something that was genuinely like Melville, Jean-Pierre Melville, with all the kind of introspection of the gangsters, and then producing action sequences like Peckinpah. If he could have married those two like that, which is what he wanted to, it would have been brilliant. But he can't do it at that point. I think maybe he acquired the ability a little bit later on. We can talk about other John Woo films if you like.
I wanted to talk about Philip Kwok, who was the stunt coordinator for a film called Rieu, the story of Ricky. Have you seen that?
No. I know its reputation as one of the most violent, most violent kung fu movie. Has it got people's jaws being punched off?
Yeah. It's brilliant.
Is it like is it a prison movie?
Yeah, cartoon-esque prison movie. Very funny, very entertaining. Tight 90 minutes as well. And Philip Kwok appears as a character early on in the film as well, which was one of the films that I rewatched within this. Yeah. So I watched A Better Tomorrow, which was okay. I suppose that was the first of the heroic bloodshed films, wasn't it? And the first of John Woo. The Killer, which was okay. Again, it's got some nice little sequences. I wasn't as engaged as I was with Hard Boiled. I don't think the editing was as tight. I feel that the narrative or the journey of the film in Hard Boiled like paces along quite well. Yes, there might not be a great deal of characterization, but I followed it. I enjoyed it. I was on the journey. One thing I'd like to talk about very briefly is like the editing. I'm reading Walter Murch and Michael Ondaatje. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Ondaatje, yeah.
Ondaatje.
The guy that wrote The English Patient.
The Conversations. Did you ever read it?
No.
I'm reading that at the moment, and it's brilliant, and I definitely highly recommend it. He's recutting Apocalypse Now, the Redux version, but he's talking about editing and talking about the art of editing. The editors are some people that don't really get as much praise as they should do, and I think that a great deal of the film, like they say, like a film can be and a performance can be made or broken with an edit. I think the editing in Hard Boiled is great. It moves you along. It moves you along nicely, and you seem to you follow it. You know, he John Woo edited it with I'm going to name check them now. 3 other people: R. Chick, Kit Wai-kai, and David Wu. So there were 4 editors on Hard Boiled, and there were also about 4 editors on Apocalypse Now, which is interesting. I think the editing is great. When you're talking about action sequences, it's not just about how it's filmed; it's about how it's snipped together.
Oh no, I know that, and I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I was going to just say there's a sequence in what was the second Daniel Craig Bond film?
Oh, Quantum of Solace.
Maybe it's that there was an action sequence edited like terribly. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where we are. I don't know what's happening. And I feel that in Hard Boiled, that's not the case. I feel that you pretty much, you know, even though it shouldn't really make sense, it kind of works as a piece. That's my opinion. I thought.
But yeah, no, I think as a piece of action choreography, I just think the sequences go on too long. They just go on too long, really. And can I tell you my John Woo, how I first discovered John Woo? I didn't discover John Woo, I knew who he was, but I didn't actually. I saw these posters around Chinatown. I was sort of living in London with John Woo is God, and then obviously I sort of read. I was kind of aware who he was because Hard Target was coming out, Hard Boiled was coming out. But then in Chinatown they did in the Prince Charles Cinema they did the John Woo triple bill, and John Woo was in attendance. So I've sort of seen John Woo.
Right.
And I bought a ticket, not really knowing that much other than like the reputation of Hard Boiled. I'd read the kind of the 5-star review, probably actually read that better than a dozen diehards review as it came out. And my experience of watching a John Woo triple bill is like my experience of actually watching Hard Boiled, 3 films condensed into one. They had A Better Tomorrow, A Bullet to the Head, which is his very, very long sort of Vietnam crime film. And then it was The Killer. And I'd never experienced this before. I love action cinema. It made it be evident, like talking, like negatively about this film, but I love action cinema. And I sat through A Better Tomorrow and A Bullet to the Head, and I thought, I don't know if I want to see anybody get shot anymore. I got real action fatigue. Maybe you shouldn't watch these films back to back. And then, and I can't remember if John Woo came out before The Killer or after it. I genuinely can't remember. He did this lovely, lovely Q&A, and I thought, I really like this man. And I was delighted to find out that he was a Christian, because I am, and he's a Christian that makes really violent films, and I'm a Christian that likes really violent films. And he did this lovely Q&A. And then I don't know if it's because it might have been before The Killer, and it must have had a little bit of a breather. And then I found The Killer exhilarating, and so it's a little bit like that was like a microcosm of watching all of Hard Boiled, because Hard Boiled, I found the first sort of 2/3 of it exhausting, and I wasn't. This time, and I wasn't, and that's I think that had been my experience in the past. I found it exhausting. I thought there's no characterization, virtually no characterization. There's Chow Yun-fat just being wildly annoying. No one's addressing the fact that in the opening shootout, which he initiates, everyone in that tea house gets killed. So he's responsible for killing loads of innocent civilians, and
cops.
And a cop. But that's interesting. That's something that they don't really play on. He kills an undercover cop, which I think is the most interesting thing he does. Yeah, and it doesn't really bother him. It bothers him superficially, but it doesn't really bother him. And then you have these like big set pieces, and then when we get to the hospital, which is so if you imagine the first 2/3 of the film being like, Better Tomorrow and the very, very exhausting A Bullet to the Head put together, and I just thought, oh, we're coming up to this like big, massive gunfight at the end. I'm tired. I don't want to watch this anymore. And then I kind of got my second win with it. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the last 35 minutes of the film, especially that wanna, where Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung are just basically wiping out 2 corridors worth of gangsters. And so that's my that has been consistently my experience with John Woo movies. And I have to say, I never really enjoyed even Face Off to an extent, which a lot of people say is the most Woo-esque of his American movies. I never really found any of them completely satisfying in the way that I wanted to. apart from the rewatch of Hard Target, which probably disqualifies me from the conversation.
and the podcast as well, mate.
The podcast.
Get replaced. I've never seen Hard Target.
It was Jean-Claude Van Damme's Chance Boudreaux. It's got. I have to say, it's got the worst line of anything. I mean, it's worse than Mickey and Dumbo, because you can't make the excuse translation. There's a brilliant bit. He's called Chance Boudreaux, which he has to be to just justify the fact that he's got this French accent.
Yeah.
And they go, why did they call you Chance? And he goes, because my mama took one, like that. And it's just, and I thought, you can't mitigate against that. There's like bad subtitles. That's a man speaking English. That was written in English for him to speak, and it's just the worst line, appallingly delivered. Yeah, I love that film. I love Hard Target.
I think the only. Go on, let me speak for a second,
no,
just a minute, and then you can get back onto it.
All right.
Hard Target I haven't seen. Face Off I saw. What was the other?
Wind Talkers. That was the one. That's the one everyone forgets. Broken Arrow.
No, I don't even think I saw that. I think Face Off was the only
2,
American.
which I really enjoyed that. Actually, that was very good. That has doves in it, and and it has that great shot where Tom Cruise catches a blade. So I think that Dougray Scott, but they've got that great. I think it's Dougray Scott tries to stab him, and he catches the knife in his hands, and the blade is like a fraction of an inch from his eyeball. It's just a great held shot. That's a shot I remember. And then I think he started to go wrong with him. He did a Van Damme, not Van Damme film, a Dolph Lundgren film. I can't remember what it was called. And then he did like Payback with Ben Affleck, and then sort of the bottom fell out commercially for him, and he went back to Hong Kong, which is a nice way of talking about the other John Woo movie I watched, Red Clef, which, as we were talking before we started recording this, you reminded me that it was originally made in 2 parts. It's a historical action movie, again starring Tony Leung. Was supposed to be starring Chow Yun-fat, but I think there's a little bit of a fallout there. And it's about a very significant battle in China's history, sort of medieval battle that I know absolutely nothing about, and I loved it. I loved it so much, and I thought the idea of like a very stately, like 2-part historical epic, just sounds great, because it's, and I figured like, he learned the lessons, he corrected the errors of Hard Boiled. And it was so beautifully contained in its acting, and the characters really well delineated, and there was lots of very interesting talk about strategy and honor, and and because it's got Tony Leung front and center, who's a very we haven't really talked about how good an actor he is, and I think in the 90s and early noughties, I would say he was the kind of king of world cinema, and possibly one of the best actors on the planet, especially when he's worked with Wong Kar-wai and things like In the Mood for Love and Lust, Caution and stuff like that. He's an outstanding actor and very, very still, very quiet actor. And he's kind of the, he kind of holds the film together with this sort of very quiet, sort of kind of strategic way of being a warrior. And that's not to say, and the combat is beautiful. The combat is so beautifully done, and they're incredibly long, but it's a battle. It's supposed to be long. There's incredibly long sort of beautifully choreographed bits of action, and they are over the top, because it's still even though it's just kind of a historic epic, it's still a Chinese action movie. So all of the characters do things that are kind of humanly impossible. But I didn't mind any of that, and I just thought it was, it was a corrective to all the things that annoyed me about Hard Boiled. I thought it was just a beautifully made historical action movie with some absolutely exhilarating battle sequences.
Nice. Tony Leung, just as we were just talking about him, the first film that Tony Leung ever did was Game of Death in 1978.
Really?
Yeah, on his IMDb.
I didn't know that.
He must be like 15. I think he was born in 62. So 78, 77. So it'd be 15 or 16. I don't know what part he played, like some young kid. But I thought that's a pretty cool way to start your career. His final film.
Well, kind of. The ghoulish exploitation of Bruce Lee's death. But I still love Game. It's David.
It's just got some great sequences, you know, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sequences, like ridiculous. Infernal Affairs is a better film than Hard Boiled. I'll give you
hands down.
I mean, it's constructed better, as you say. There's more characterization. It looks better. I did like the music in Hard Boiled.
Well, isn't the music? I was wondering if they just lifted the music off of either command. This is the kettle drum music, isn't it?
In Hard
Boiled. Yeah, it sounded like a complete lift, and I didn't look into this of the soundtrack of 48 Hours or Commando. So I just wondered if they just nicked the music. It didn't seem like it seemed just like stolen to me. I mean, I don't know if it was. I'm not saying it was, but yeah, I mean, it was so flagrantly, almost like beat for beat to the point of plagiarism, referencing, like Walter Hill 1980s action music specifically, or rather Joel Silver, the producer, actually, so it just sounded so much like the music for Commando and or 48 Hours, to the point where I thought, I do like this music, but the reason I like it is because I think they've lifted it from, a better 80s action movie in 48 Hours and a more entertaining one in Commando, which is a cartoon, but they know it's a cartoon.
Michael Gibbs was the guy who did the soundtrack to Hard Boiled, but it's actually it's a full soundtrack of Hard Boiled.
Okay.
So I don't know.
It just seemed that, but not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I recently watched Reanimator, so it's weird what annoys you. If the film annoys you, everything about, or if I'm like everything about it annoys me. Oh, they rip the music off. But I've recently sort of I've been on a journey with Stuart Gordon horror movies, and the theme to Reanimator is like shamelessly rips off Bernard Herrmann's Psycho theme, to the point where I think Bernard Herrmann's widow said to Richard Brand, the composer of Reanimator, if Bernard Herrmann was alive today, he'd kick your ass. Nice. And they were going to put in a disclaimer actually saying apologies to Bernard Herrmann after, but it got taken off the credits, and so that laid the composer open to a lifelong cycle of abuse by Bernard Herrmann fans for ripping off the Psycho theme, just sticking it over the credits of Reanimator. That's an aside, but I don't mind because I really like Reanimator.
There was a game called Stranglehold that was
I played it
to Hard Boiled. Yeah, there you go.
I played it twice. I played.
Nice.
Yeah, sorry. I played it on hard, and do you know what? Because it's a computer game. This is again. There's a backhanded insult in the compliment to Stranglehold. I enjoyed it much more as a computer game than I did Hard Boiled as a film, because what it is, and I think Hard Boiled essentially is a computer game masquerading as a drama. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, it's massively influenced gaming after it came out. I think there's loads of sequences that are massive homages. I mean, I think Max Payne, like the Stranglehold, didn't do as well as it should have done, and I think Max Payne
didn't.
Yeah. I enjoyed Hard Boiled this time around. I don't know that I'm going to see it again anytime soon, but I will definitely probably see a sequence or two. I think we should wrap it up now. Would you like to tell the listeners what the next film's going to be?
We're going to sort of, in a sideways way, stick with Asian cinema, but we're going to look at a remake of a film that we've mentioned in this episode. The remake of Infernal Affairs, Martin Scorsese's, the film that he eventually, after much snubberage, got his Oscar for, The Departed. We have to apologise to Martin Scorsese because it was never our intention to do. We've only done, how many episodes have we done by the time this comes out? Like 10, including a minisode, and 3 of them will have been aimed at Martin Scorsese. We actually, like I said, we do like Martin Scorsese.
I love Martin Scorsese. I think he's a brilliant director. He's one of totally my favourite directors.
We both acknowledge that he's an absolute master. And this is actually Damian's suggestion, not mine. So Damian, potentially you're going to be the bad guy. Yeah. And we're going to look at The Departed, the remake of Infernal Affairs, starring Jack Nicholson, Leonardo DiCaprio,
Ray
Mark
Winston.
Wahlberg, Ray Winston, Matt Damon, and a host of other character actors.
We'll see you next time for The Departed.
The Departed.
Well, until the next time, a bit of housekeeping. Thanks very much for listening. As always, give us a subscribe, a like, tell your mates. At one point, we might get over 5 viewers, and that'd be great.
Yeah, we might get an email, even if you want to like abuse us, troll us.
Yeah,
we'd love it. We just need the attention.
punchingupmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Email us. Until the next time. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you're welcome. Bye from England.
Goodbye from Sydney, Australia.
Submission has been completed.
Groovy.